That doesn't often happen with young babies and children that have autism. We often see repetitive kinds of behavior, so they might do odd things with toys that typical children don't usually do. A lot of times we have delayed language or odd kind of language development, and social skills look very different. So those are sort of the major signs we see early on.
Yeah, got you. And then there's different levels, of course, right?
Yeah, it's such a huge spectrum. And so some people are, you see signs very early. Some develop signs around 18 months or 2 years. We have that sort of scenario. And then we have people that are getting diagnosed when they're 30 years old.
Wow.
And they didn't really know that's what was sort of happening with their brain. And they may be married and have a business and have kids and realize that they hadn't been functioning quite the same as other people, but didn't know why. And then they're diagnosed sometimes early, like late.
Welcome to Crowning Connections with Rob Clemens. It is a very exciting day here because we're getting a chance to talk about some community involvement and charity work and all these great things. And I have a great person on the show. I've known this person for quite some time, does some great things with SOS Care. Sarah Pope, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Man, I tell you what, I've seen you around the circuits for a long time. You get out there, you do a lot of great things. You lived in Myrtle Beach for a little while. How long have you been here for?
Oh my goodness. 30 years.
30 years. Okay. That makes you a long timer here.
Yes.
You know?
I'm local.
But you are finding more people who have lived here for a long time than you used to. When I moved here back in around the late 90s, you'd meet people, and if they were here for like 2 or 3 years, that was a big deal.
Yeah.
Yeah,
agreed.
you know what I mean?
Yes.
Were you here long enough to see, like, in 30 years, my gosh, I mean, what all has happened with the roads in 30 years? You remember 544 used to be just one lane this way and one lane that way, for example?
Yeah, there was nothing here when I moved here. No barefoot landing.
No barefoot
Broadway,
landing. The pavilion was still here.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Okay. All right.
And I
good.
lived at River Oaks, which was a hunting or kind of something. It wasn't even, there was no neighborhood. There was two houses. I was in the woods.
You were in the woods. Well, it looks a little different now. You know, we ought to spend this whole segment doing memories of Myrtle Beach.
Let's do
Would
it.
you like to do that? All right, let's scrap the whole plan.
Let's do that.
Well, Sarah, it is great to have you on the show. We're going to talk about SOS Care today. By the way, I saw this earlier, 2022 Nonprofit of the Year per the Chamber of Commerce.
Yes.
That's really, really cool.
Woo!
Woo-woo! So how did you do it? Were you out did you have to go out and campaign to get the number one?
No. We have a lot of people that are following us and vote for us because our team does amazing things.
You guys are doing amazing stuff. And so let's get into that. But before we get to that, tell us a little bit about yourself. You know, how did you get here? And take us back to the beginning.
The beginning of time.
Back when, so there's a big bang. You're going to have to skip through some of that stuff and go straight to when you were,
All right. So I went to school in England. That's where I was born. And I was in college and I was studying social work. And my professor said, I have an internship for you. You're going to work at the National Autistic Society. And I was like, oh, that's not what I was thinking. I wanted to work with sort of children, maybe in the Catholic charity kind of era. I'd never been around people with disabilities.
And let me take one quick commercial break here to ask. So were you planning on going in that field at all, or was this just completely out of the blue? Okay.
I was not. I mean, I knew I was going to work with children in some way, but I'd never been around people with disabilities, so I didn't know anything about that. So when he said that was my internship, I was a little nervous, actually, and sort of said, I don't think I want to do that. And he said, I don't think you really have an option. So I went to the National Autistic Society in Kent, in England, and it was a school, and I walked in, and I was like, oh, wow, I had no idea. I've never seen children like this before, all playing on their own and doing sort of unusual things, and I was fascinated immediately, and I just knew that was where I was supposed to be. Wow. And so I think I was about 18 at that time, And I've actually been in the field ever since. So that was my first exposure to children with disabilities.
That's an incredible start. Let me ask you, was this professor, was that part of like this professor's thing, was the autistic community, if you will, or was this just kind of a magical moment where he found this random thing that was the best fit for you?
Seems like it was sort of supposed to be random, but that's probably not the case, right?
Right.
It was in my plan.
Yeah.
I didn't know, but that was the moment where I was like, okay, this is what I'm supposed to do forever. And then I read every book about autism. I volunteered every weekend. I just loved it. It just became my entire focus of my life, and then I've been in the field ever since.
Well, I mean, you've been doing amazing.
Old, Rob.
Old, so
oh, come on
now.
Long time.
I mean, I was doing the math. I was like, okay, 30 years in Myrtle Beach. She came here when she was 5, so she's probably like 35, somewhere there. Yeah.
Ish.
Ish, right? Okay. So as far as you're in England at this point, and by the way, I don't know if you know my backstory. I lived in England for 3 years.
No, I did not.
I was,
know that.
You know where Milton Hall and Lakenheath Air Force bases are?
I was just there.
No way. You were just there?
I was just there.
My gosh. What were you doing over?
My niece lives there.
Oh, okay. All right. Great.
At the base, like on the back of the base. I was just there. So I was listening to the planes taking off out of her window.
Wow.
And the national anthem at 4:00 every day.
So good. It's so good.
Yes.
Living on the Air Force bases, and shout out to my military personnel who are listening to the show. We always have to, you're going to have the morning time where the flag is going up, and the nighttime you all stop and do that. I'd love to institute that at my business here. What do you think?
I think you should.
I think
it was
it'd be cool.
really fun.
I want the bugle in the whole 9 yards.
I love it. It's a great way to have a 4:00 sort of happy hour time.
Right, exactly. Right after that, you do your happy hour.
Yes.
That's the way it works. Good memories of England, though. And we were in a place called Newmarket. I don't know if you know, that was a little bit out there. So great place there. But so you go back, you're in England, and then you ended up coming over to the States. How did that happen?
I used to do temp work in sort of group homes and things like that. And then in between I would travel because, in Europe, lots of us like to throw a backpack on and head out. So I was in that sort of era. And so I traveled a lot. I've sort of been halfway around the world and back, and ended up coming to America. And I met a family that I loved in Dallas, and I took care of their little guy. He was 2. And I ended up staying, and then went back to school there, and sort of stayed in my field.
Okay, wow, that's really cool. Well, so what is it that speaks to you about this autism? Because obviously it hit you early, and you've devoted your life to it. What is it that speaks to you so much?
Well, I think it's just it's such a unique kind of way a brain functions, and I've always been interested in behavior, and so the behavior is very interesting of people with autism, seeing how they function in the world. And a lot of times people with disabilities are not really in the forefront of people's minds, and so becoming an advocate for people that couldn't really always speak up for themselves was just something that I was very passionate about.
That's very powerful. What about the families? And if you would, I'd love to get educated on this, just because I believe that a lot of people are out there and maybe they don't quite understand what's happening. When do people typically find out that a child is autistic in their early childhood development? Well,
in South Carolina, we're a little bit behind the times with getting diagnosed. It's always hard to find a pediatrician, a developmental pediatrician that you can get into early enough. And so diagnosis could be at 18 months, but usually in South Carolina, it's sometimes not till 3 or 4 years old.
Wow.
And so we miss a lot of time for early intervention, which is really the key for sort of figuring out what to do and help your child early on. If you're a parent out there, and I hope you don't mind me going into this, because I think it would be really interesting to know what kinds of signs might a parent see early on in a young, let's say an infant that may have autism. Are there any ways for them to tell? Yeah. So one of the things that people probably don't know much about is something called joint attention, and it's a very early sign. So a lot of times when you're hanging out with your baby or your little kid, like if something happens, like an airplane goes by, most people are going to look and see that happening together, joint attention to something that's happening in the environment. That doesn't often happen with young babies and children that have autism. We often see repetitive kinds of behavior, so they might do odd things with toys that typical children don't usually do. A lot of times we have delayed language or odd kind of language development, and social skills look very different. So those are sort of the major signs we see early on.
Yeah, got you. And then there's different levels, of course, right?
Yeah, it's such a huge spectrum. And so some people are, you see signs very early. Some develop signs around 18 months or 2 years. We have that sort of scenario. And then we have people that are getting diagnosed when they're 30 years old.
Wow.
And they didn't really know that's what was sort of happening with their brain. And they may be married and have a business and have kids and realized that they hadn't been functioning quite the same as other people, but didn't know why, and then they're diagnosed sometimes early, like late in life. Yeah,
very, very interesting.
Yeah.
Now, how do you get to that point though? Because what I'm hearing you describing is somebody, they're going along and they're just going about their life, and then all of a sudden they find out that they are on some kind of a range. How does that even happen? Are you going to a doctor and they say, "Hey, I see something in you," or do people sometimes are they already finding themselves trying to do other kinds of, I don't know, concentration-based medication or something like that, and then you find out that there's something more to it?
Yeah, I think sometimes when people are older and they find out they're sort of having trouble, they're having trouble in relationships, or they're having trouble at work with social sort of environments and things like that, and they don't know why exactly, but they know they're not doing life like other people. And sometimes they end up going to counseling, and counselors at that point can diagnose someone, on the autism spectrum when they're older.
Gotcha. What do you do at that point? I mean, from those people who are in that situation, what do you recommend?
Well, I think when they're older, cognitive behavioral therapy is usually a good route to go. And then just clarifying sort of why you're doing things the way you're doing them and being able to work through that. We all work differently. All of our brains are different. We all have odd things we do, or obsessive things we do, or sensory things we do. So I think people just need to know that, like, it's okay. We're all a little bit different, and here's how you can, work on this part of your relationship or this issue you're having at work and that kind of thing. So counseling's helpful for people that find out, later in life.
Yeah. Well, that's a great point. And I think it's one of those things where, it's nothing to be ashamed of by any means. So it's good if you can at least diagnose it. I would imagine that would be a positive. Well, so let's talk SOS. How did that get started?
Well, SOS was founded by Dr. Bill Davis in 1989, so a long time ago. He was a doctor that lived in Myrtle Beach, and he gave up his practice because he wanted to help the community. And he's just one of the most amazing people I've ever met. He is 86, I believe now. I just spoke with him yesterday, so we still talk every month or so and check in. But he did community surveys, and he would find out what the needs are, and he would develop a program based on the needs in the community. So SOS has been many things before it was really designed for people with disabilities. So he helped start the care team. So he worked with people that had AIDS. He's helped with communities that were really in need of nursing and childcare and medical attention and things like that. So he's done multiple things in this area, and then he would spin off the program into its own nonprofit, and then he would go back and do another community survey and really look at what the needs were again at that time. So many organizations started because of his vision.
Wow. So this started in Myrtle Beach though?
Yes,
wow.
it did.
So cool. Where's he from originally?
I think he's actually from North Carolina. He's living in North Carolina right now.
Very cool.
And I think he's actually from there, but he lived here for many years.
I think more communities need this. We need people who are ready to get out there and get active. Do you find many, I don't know, young professionals who volunteer? Do you guys have some sort of a volunteer program or an internship program with SOS?
We do. We love having interns. We have a lot of interns that join us from CCU or Georgetown Tech, and a lot of times they end up staying and working for us. So we really find that young people are very interested in our field of work, and they have a great opportunity as an intern because we have so many different programs at SOS. And then usually they end up staying. So
yeah. What kind of positions do you guys hire? I mean, obviously, that people want to hear about. What kinds of things could you get involved with?
Well, one of the things that we hire quite a lot for, this is probably our most in need of for hiring, are registered behavioral technicians. And those are people that provide ABA therapy, which is our early intervention. Used to be early intervention. Now we're providing it for older children too. But we have about 45 therapists that work for us.
Wow.
And they do individual therapy with children every day. So it's very intensive therapy. Sometimes 25, 30 hours a week, one-to-one. And so we hire registered behavioral technicians for those positions fairly often. And then we have other positions, we have about 14 programs. And so often, we grow a program and we need another person to come work there too. But we like people with behavioral training. And once they become a registered behavioral technician, it's a credential that you can use anywhere, in the country. It's a nationwide credential. So it's you can work with children, with autism or disabilities in schools or private practice or, for-profit organizations too, once you have that credential.
Wow, so cool. Very, very good to hear people are still getting in that field. I know it's always, you wonder where people are finding their interest. Certain industries have a hard time hiring certain positions. It seems to me that people, and you tell me what your thoughts are, but it feels like people are more and more giving in the modern society. I feel like people want to get more involved. Gen Z, young millennials, this is a big agenda, is to get more involved and help the community. Is this what you're seeing out there?
It is. Most of the people that come to us to work in that particular area are usually younger. You're going to be sort of energetic to work with some of these children because they're quite challenging and, physical. So lots of moving around and chasing in playgrounds and running around after them and things like that. So it is a position that's great for a person that's younger.
Yeah, good exercise, right?
Yes, very good exercise.
Yeah. That's awesome. So on a personal level, what's your experience been with autism? I mean, you have some personal experience rather than just the business?
Yes. So my oldest son is 28, and he was born, seemed to be a typical baby until he was about 18 months old, and then lost all of his language and started doing the unusual repetitive sort of play and started having a lot of tantrums that were a little more extreme than your typical child. And I sort of knew right then that my kid was probably going to be diagnosed with autism, but I could not get anyone to agree to the diagnosis. So took him to multiple doctors, and they kept trying to talk me out of it. And eventually, at 4 years old, he was diagnosed. But it took a long time. It was sort of it was in the 1990s when it was a little harder to get a diagnosis. And so he's 28 now, and he's a very interesting guy that has a lot of needs, and he has a personal care a person that comes to my house every day to work with him. So he is nonverbal, and he has a lot of physical limitations as well. He has something called regressive catatonia, which has limited a lot of his movements. So he needs a lot of care. And then my other son just turned 21. I adopted him when he was 5, and he was already diagnosed with autism. He was a kid that was pretty neglected in his early life and exposed to a lot of things with drugs and other sort of situational things that happen. So he had a pretty rough start, but he's doing pretty well right now. He volunteers at Brook Green Gardens, and he loves landscaping and taking care of the yard and the pool. He's an outdoor kind of guy.
Wow.
And just ordered his first beer. He's 21.
Okay.
And he thought that was the rule, so that's what he did on his
That's the rule.
birthday. So,
Nice.
yeah, he's a rules man.
No, well, does he enjoy beer? Sometimes
No.
people don't really. Not at all.
No,
Okay,
not
I got
really.
you.
But it was the rule. So
Yes.
a lot of people with autism live by rules,
Mm-hmm.
and Liam lives by rules. And the rule was when you turn 21, you're supposed to drink alcohol, he thought.
Right.
And so he ordered alcohol, and that's what it was. And I was like, well, okay, there
Yep.
you go. Cheers.
So cool though that he's out there. He's working, staying productive, and I think that's a good message for parents right now, right? Can you speak as a parent? You've devoted your life to it, and maybe you're more equipped than some parents. But can you talk to the parent who's out there that feels like they're struggling? Maybe they're even I don't know, maybe feeling a little depressed in some way.
Yeah.
What would you say to that parent, and what steps would you tell them to take?
Well, I think it's really important to take respite, take a break, find someone that can help you with your child so that you can leave for periods of time. We provide a respite program at SOS, so that's one of the ways people can do that. I also think it's really important to have things that you're interested in that are outside of autism, because you can get really absorbed in just 24/7 thinking about autism, planning for autism, going to therapies, taking your kid to everything you can think of to do. And it's exhausting. Spend time on the relationship that you're in with your partner or your spouse, because it's very easy to get sidetracked on sort of everything else in your family and your other kids if you have them, because the person with autism takes a lot more energy and time and effort, and there's a lot of things you have to do that you wouldn't normally have to do if you were a typical parent of typical kids. And so I also think it's really important to find other people that are going through the same thing that you're going through, which is sort of for any issue in life, really. But when you can talk with other people that understand, and you can laugh and cry and do all the things you need to do, then I think that support's super helpful.
I think that's an amazing set of tips. And one of the things I like that you said there is, you mentioned the other kids. I think that's probably, sometimes while you're so focused and so much of your time goes to one kid, maybe the other kid starts feeling like, maybe in some way left out a little bit, and there could be some effects of that. How can one get involved with, if they're listening to this today and they said, well, I'm going through some of that, I'd like to take advantage of a respite program and things. How do they get involved with that with you?
Yeah, they can just Google us, SOS Care, and then you can contact us on the website. So every program that we have has an application on the website, so you can electronically complete that. There's several different programs that people can look at to see if that's a fit for their child or the adult with the disability. And then they can call us. Our phone number's on there. Call us, and we have an intake and sort of referral process. So when people call, we get them to the right person and make sure they get their questions answered and find the way to the right program.
Makes sense. Okay. All right. So, so let's pick up from some things that you have that have been going on over the last few years. One of them being Oak Tree Farms, right?
Yes.
Tell me about Oak Tree Farms.
Well, so we broke ground about 2 years ago, and that's when you guys were so generous and helped us with our roof for our transition house, and we're so grateful that you were able to do that.
Glad to help, of course, but
Thank
yes.
you. So 5 men with disabilities have been living there for over a year, and we've just been so really amazed at the progress they've made. So initially we were thinking, do we have a support person live with them, or do we start off being as independent as we think we can be and just push supports in and go there every day and make sure they're sort of doing okay and they can cook and they're doing their grocery shopping and they're going to work and all of those things. And so we ended up sort of pushing in services, every day or so. And they have just sort of blown the wonder. I mean, we're like, wow, how did they ever figure out how to problem solve all of these things on their own? And I see now that the less we were involved, the more that they stepped up and really made decisions on their own. And so that's really been helpful in us training for the next group of people that are going to be going out there.
Was that part of the vision of Oak Tree Farms? I mean, like when you did this, were you thinking, well, this will be a nice side effect, or was that just a surprise?
Well, I mean, we hoped that they would become as independent as they could be. And we knew we were training and working with them to do that, but they're doing things that are beyond the expectations that we had. And, I just see them immersed in the community, completely immersed in the community with things that they decided that they wanted to do on their own. And they're going out, they're going, to trivia, and they're at all the festivals in Conway, and they're in the running club, and they have friends that are outside of our group of people at SOS. They've made friends in other areas, and they're doing all kinds of things in the community together. And they're just, they really used each other's strengths to sort of push their agenda forward and become more independent. And it's just great watching them work as a team together, problem solving and getting out in the world. And so that was pretty a good, for us, like gauge of what we should be focusing on for the next group. The next group is very large. So we're building 3 apartment buildings. We're getting ready to start that. And then we will have 72 people that are moving. So that's
so 5 in the first section, 72 in the second. All right, I like it.
So the timing was not quite how we had thought it would work. We applied for funding, and one of the grants has taken 2 years to actually come to fruition. And so that was supposed to be built like a year ago, and then we would have built the next building. But it didn't happen that way, and it's all coming together at the same time, and that's okay because we'll figure it out. But so a lot of people will be moving at one time. So we're providing training and classes right now for all of those people. They're choosing their roommates. They're deciding who's going to live where in which unit, and we'll be moving. It'll be like the first day of college where everyone moves in together, and we figure it out.
So nice. So how did these people get selected, or how did they get chosen, I guess, to be in this?
So they go on the website first, and then they fill out a survey to tell us they're interested in living at Oak Tree Farm. And then there's a more in-depth application process. So we find out a lot more details about them because it is fairly independent living. They have to be able to spend quite a few hours on their own and be able to, provide themselves with some nutrition and activities and things like that. And so the application process is quite in depth, and then we bring them in and we do an 8-week training class, and then we get to see them in small groups. So they're in groups of maybe 8, and we get to see how they work together and how they really are socially together and that kind of thing, so we can see if they're paired up well or who they would best sort of be suited with roommates and that kind of thing.
That's great. So are they a certain age range? I mean, what kind of age range are you looking at?
Yeah, I mean, you have to be 18 to apply. Most of them are sort of in that 20 to sort of late 30 kind of age range. But we've got a couple that are a little bit outside of 40, and we've got some that are a little bit younger, but that's the majority are sort of in that age range. They've all lived at home all of their lives. None of these people have ever lived on their own. Some of them have never been away from home.
Wow.
And so we added in a mental health component as well for counseling services because it's such a huge transition in life. So we're just beginning that program, and we brought some counselors in, and they're going to help the family and the person with a disability work on that transition before they get out there, because there's so many changes that happen with that relationship as they move on.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. What's the end goal for these people who move in?
Well, the end goal is that they are so happy that they never want to go home, and their families know that they've had some sort of input into where their person's living as they're aging and wondering what's going to happen to my person when I'm not here anymore.
Yeah.
And there's no plan. And so that's really sort of where we wanted to be. Is like, I want them to be happy. I want their families to see them becoming independent and self-sufficient so that we can rest in peace one day, you know?
Wow.
And yeah, so that's the end of the sort of circle of life for us. So so they'll be there forever, and we'll end up with sort of it'll be like an old people's community at some point, because they're all going to age together. And then we'll have different needs and that kind of thing that we haven't figured out yet, because no one's done that. No one's done this. So we don't know what that looks like when everyone is 65 and 70 and what happens. There'll probably be a lot of other services we have to bring in at that point, because they're all going to age at the same time, you know.
This is amazing. I mean, it's such a groundbreaking thing. Are there other SOSs around the country? Is this being done at other places? Or, I mean, because it sounds very revolutionary in concept.
There are not many places. It's a huge need. I mean, we have 300 people on our wait list for 130 places.
Right.
And, you know, there are some other nonprofits across the country. Most of them are started by families of people with disabilities in their family, and they've started a 501c3 nonprofit to be able to really get into the housing business. So there's something called the Autism Housing Network, where it tells you all of the places across the country where there might be some kind of residential program or housing project. There's not many. This is very new and very different. We modeled ours after a program in Florida called Noah's Landing, and we went there several times, and it just seemed like the right fit for us of what we wanted to do. And so we really took a lot of their ideas, and that's how we came up with Oak Tree Farm.
Very, very powerful stuff. You mentioned grants. How does that work? You know, is this a government grant, like a federal government, or is it state funded?
We've got multiple funding sources, and so it's a bit complicated. But so we've got some HUD funds, we've got some South Carolina Housing Trust funds, and we also have some ARPA funds. And so we've got multiple funding sources, and then SOS also has loans with South State. And so they've been our partners in helping us figure out how we would, you know, fund the whole project up until now. And so we meet with them often and say, help us, we need more money.
Right.
And then we write more grants and we fill in the gaps. And fortunately, we've got enough money to build these 3 apartment buildings and the Chapin Health and Wellness Center. And so that's a good start for us. And then we have 3 more buildings after that we'll have to find funding for, but we'll be grant writing for those too at some point soon.
And you said the Chapin Health and Wellness Center.
Yes.
Tell me about that.
Yes. So the Health and Wellness Center is really the sort of community center of the neighborhood. And so we'll be providing life skills training and employment services, and there'll be all kinds of fun activities there. So yoga and art and cooking and all of those things. And the Chapin Foundation have always been tremendous supporters of ours. And so they gave us a very generous donation to help us build the center. And then we had a capital campaign where lots of people in the community donated. And so I think we're going to be able to pay cash for that building, it looks like, which is amazing.
I'm clapping for that. That is well done.
Really amazing.
So amazing.
Yeah.
So for yourself, Sarah, and as we get towards the back half of this, what is it that motivates you in life to be like you are? Because you've obviously given yourself to something that's bigger than yourself, of course, but what motivates you on a day-to-day basis?
No one else is going to do this. And so I see the needs. I know the families. I live the life. And I can do it. And I have the support to do it. And so I love going to work every day. I love problem solving. I love creating new programs. And I'm good at it. So so for me, it's just I'm like the vehicle. You know,
Yeah.
I think it was just like, okay, things come to me very easily. And people come into my path the way they need to for all of the things that we need to get done. And so, people come up with their own way of how I ended up doing all of these things. Depends on what you believe in, but I'm just sort of the vehicle, and all of the things that need to come to make these things happen for the people that need us the most.
That's great. That's amazing stuff, and I can very much appreciate and respect the path you've taken here, and doing great things for the community, for the Autistic Society, I guess I could say, and the question I have for you is, how can people best get involved? If somebody hears this today and they want to volunteer, they want to give money, they want to do whatever they can, you have more buildings coming up, Monarch Roofing, of course, we'd love to help you with some of those roofs, as you know. What else can we do to help, and how can people get involved?
Well, I think the best way is for people to go to the website. There's places where you can donate. There's places where you can fill out an application to volunteer. There's ways to get in touch with us. And so, whatever people are looking for, we probably have a program for that. If we don't, we'll be thinking about why we don't, and taking that into consideration as we develop our programs for next year or following years. And we always need donations. And so people can support however they can. We have multiple events. All of those things are on our website, or join the Capital Campaign. Any way that people can help. It really is a community sort of project. So many people have been involved in what we do. We're so lucky to have businesses and people that just, individual donors that help us. So all of those things, whatever it is that people can do, if you can give $10 a month to help, we have a recurring, gift place where you can make that donation. Seems like it wouldn't be much, but all of those things add up so quickly when multiple people are doing those things. And we always need volunteers for events and things like that too.
Terrific. Well, that is very, very good information. I appreciate you sharing this with us today, of course. Anything else that you want to talk about coming up that you're excited about before we sign off?
We always have so many things going on. There really have multiple events. Yeah. So just look on our website and see if you are interested in a golf event or macaroni and cheese cook-off or whatever the things are.
Macaroni and cheese, man.
Right? So we have multiple things happening all the time. And Palmetto Giving Day is in May. That's our biggest fundraiser. We really did amazing things that day. So that's great if people want to be involved in that and help us. So any of those things, we'll take any help, however people want to give it.
That's an amazing thing. Well, Sarah, I appreciate you being on today. A lot of great information. For anybody listening, definitely I encourage you to go to the website, reach out, get involved. Sarah, thank you for being on here today.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it so
Absolutely.
much.
Sarah Pope, SOS Care, doing amazing things. I'm going to sign off with this one because it's such a powerful thing. Give back to your community. Learn a little bit more about autism and how you can help your fellow man. And we'll go from there. All right. This is Rob Clemens signing out with Crowning Connections. We'll see you guys next time.